Welcome to the NonProfit Voice, a podcast series brought to you by NonProfit Pro, the go-to resource for nonprofit management and strategy. In each episode, we're going to sit down with leaders of nonprofit organizations, the people responsible for paving the way for our sector, along with key technology strategy partners who are transforming our industry. Here at the NonProfit Voice, we'll have refreshing conversations in which we will all learn more about the convergence of nonprofit and technology. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website to find more episodes of the NonProfit Voice. And you can download all of the NonProfit Voice episodes on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. We will have all the links down below. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the NonProfit Voice. I'm Nhu Te, Editor-in-Chief of NonProfit Pro, and I will be your host for today's episode. Before we get started, I wanted to take this opportunity to say Happy New Year, Happy 2020. I am very happy to be back in the office and, back into the routine of things. I hope everybody had a great holiday and a really great start to the new year. So today is episode 9 of the NonProfit Voice, and I'm really excited to announce that moving forward, we're gonna go bi-weekly. So instead of waiting for a full month to hear the next episode of the NonProfit Voice, we are coming at you every 2 weeks. And I am super stoked about it if you haven't already noticed. All right, so now back to today's episode. So today I have 2 very exceptional guests on the line with me today. Please join me in welcoming Martin Quessenberry, Director of Digital Projects and Innovation at Shriners Hospitals for Children, and Scot Chisholm, CEO and founder of Classy. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you both doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Great to hear. So, the year just ended, and so today I wanted to dive into some Giving Tuesday trends and talk about what we can do to look forward into the 2020 season. But before we get into our conversation today, I want to learn more about you guys. So, Martin, can you share your background in the philanthropic sector with us?
I can. I'm actually a bit of an anomaly. I've been in the nonprofit sector for about 4 years, a little over 4 years now with Shriners Hospitals for Children. And a lot of my experience comes from the retail side. So I spent close to 10 years in digital development with the National Hockey League. And I also spent quite a bit of time with Disney on their Disney development teams for DisneyWorld.com and Disneyland.com. And decided to move into the nonprofit because of the passion and the mission that Shriners participates in from a nonprofit side. And what's interesting is I've able to take a lot of what I've learned from the retail side and really push it into the digital landscape for nonprofit, especially our nonprofit, around donor experiences, user interfaces, and how a donor spends their time through our site, through our nonprofit technology, as well as donating, and most importantly, what is that journey after that donation? What type of tracks are they going through? How do we continue to communicate with them and retain them as a donor? So in a collective way, it's been a unique experience, and I'm looking forward to being in this space for quite a long time.
Awesome. And Scott, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm also a little bit of an anomaly. I didn't work at the NHL, but Classy was actually started, although I wish I did. Classy was actually started as a charitable event ourselves, a pub crawl of all things, to raise money for the American Cancer Society, because my mom had cancer growing up, and I had moved from the East Coast, and a bunch of my friends that were living here in San Diego with me all had been really profoundly affected by the disease in various ways. And so instead of just kind of doing what a 24-year-old does, we were momentarily inspired to do something positive with our lives. And we came up with this idea to raise some money for the American Cancer Society. And what better way to do that than, getting your friends together and collecting some cash at the bars and donating it afterwards. And we ran into a bunch of headaches, you could call them, or friction in the process when we were trying to not only plan the event and pick a charity, but also donate the funds afterwards. And we ended up selecting the local chapter of the American Cancer Society here in San Diego. And after we had done the event, we raised $1,000, and I had called up the ACS here, and I told them what we did, and they actually got upset at us for hosting an event and using their logo and whatnot outside of their formal procedures. And I asked her if did she want the $1,000, and she said, well, of course we want the $1,000, but you have to come to this sanctioned fundraising event called the Relay for Life. And for those who are familiar with that event, great event, but you walk around the track for 24 hours, and that wasn't necessarily our idea of a good time at that age. So we ended up going nonetheless, and we gave them the $1,000, and we sort of left with sort of this bad taste in our mouth. And by the way, as just a caveat, I love the American Cancer Society still. We work with them today. But on that day, we were kind of like left with questions, more questions than answers. It was our first foray really into charitable giving and philanthropy. And there's just a bunch of hoops we had to jump through just to do what we now call sort of a third-party event. And they weren't really making it easier for us. So from there, we really had a very simple mission to get young people involved in philanthropy in fun and accessible ways. And we were inspired, obviously, by the sort of pub crawl story. And very similar to what Marty said, actually, it all came down to making the experience, and at the time, it really didn't have much to do with technology, but making the experience of giving positive, fun, engaging, and repeating. And that's what we're focused on. And for the next 4 years, really, we would do various fundraising events around San Diego, and we would pick a nonprofit partner and try to fund a project together, whether that was restoring the wing of a homeless shelter, whether it was cleaning beaches, or a variety of other things. And eventually the events got so big, literally to the point where there were thousands of people coming to these things. We had this headliner concert that Modest Yahoo was actually the headliner for. So these things were like big productions at this point. And we had outgrown the technology that we were using. Essentially, it allowed people to buy tickets to our events and make a donation. And what we really wanted them to do is to be able to create a personal fundraising page and essentially tap the early versions of social media to raise more money. And so we hired a developer to essentially build us what would become Classy later, but this very simple app for that Modest Yahoo show that allowed attendees to buy a ticket and then in just a couple clicks, create a personal fundraising page and share the fact that they were raising money for a variety of charities on Facebook, which had literally just opened up beyond college students. So this gives you the date, like around 2009 or so. And MySpace, which was on the steep decline. But that was basically sort of the landscape at the time, and things have changed. But regardless, the charities raised a ton of money. And because the app was so focused on simplicity and the end user experience, the charities that we were benefiting literally reached out to us and said, can we use this for our own campaigns and events throughout the year outside of our own fundraising events that we were hosting? And that's really when sort of the light bulb moment went on for us. We were solving a personal need. And we were then being sort of asked to use this product, across other different use cases, if you will. And so that's when we decided to quit our jobs, and we went through an incubator here in San Diego, and we relaunched as Classy, the technology company, about 12 months later, which put us in about January 2011. And since then, we've raised over $1.5 billion for charities across the United States and beyond. And we're almost at the 2 billion mark, which is exciting. We've got about 200 staffers here in San Diego, all working to build out the Classy technology product, which is essentially a suite of online fundraising tools at this point. And we work with over 4,000 organizations. So we've come a long way since the simple pub crawl, but that's kind of who we are and how we got here.
Well, that's incredible. That's such an incredible story to hear, and 2 billion is no small feat. Congratulations.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a wild ride, like most entrepreneurial journeys are. But as Marty can attest, but I think, we still point back to the origin story. That's why I spend the time to tell it, because the company was born out of a personal need, and all of our from our product development to our values really all center around that origin story and the fact that we were trying to make giving easier and simpler, and that's what it comes down to. And sometimes it's very easy to overcomplicate things, but at the end of the day, we're trying to make it easier for people to give on behalf of the organizations we work with, and that's what we still try to remind ourselves of today.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, I agree wholeheartedly. I think a lot of times companies or organizations get into building technology that isn't necessarily required, or there's not a need for it. And I think a lot of times people find themselves painting themselves into a corner because of that. But Scott said it perfectly. There was a specific need, and great tools and suites of tools were created to apply to that particular need, to really make it a fantastic user experience. And I just wanted to add that because I truly believe in that statement. And not only that, I love the story. I've heard it many times, but I like to hear it over and over again because it's such a fantastic story from start to finish.
I appreciate that. And we should also probably, tell the listeners that that we work together. That's the connection here as well. And Shriners was, and I'll let you, obviously, I don't want to speak for you, Marty, but Shriners was in a really unique place. So they like to call themselves a startup within a big organization, and they were really revolutionizing how they do digital fundraising within the organization. And I feel very lucky and grateful to have met Marty and team when we did. This was probably about 3 to 4 years ago now, at least. And we've been working together ever since, and we've done some pretty incredible things, and we've learned a lot. We've made mistakes, we've iterated on it, and we've continued to find success. And I think that, again, because we have such shared principles in terms of what fundraising is all about, I truly believe that has been the big catalyst. It isn't necessarily the technology, although the technology is good for sure. I think it's more the strategy and the principles behind it and what you're trying to do. Technology is really an enabler. It's not necessarily the silver bullet, right, that's going to solve all your problems. It's really an enabler. And I think that's what we've been able to do with Classy and Shriners.
Yeah, I believe so too. I think it's really, obviously for us, it's about the mission. Everything that we do on a day-to-day basis is about the mission and helping our children. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's that total ability to come in on a day-to-day basis, like I said, and just focus on how are we going to reach where we need to reach, and most importantly, again, how do we expand to continue to help more children in more places. And I couldn't agree with that more.
Well, that's great stuff. And I think, what we're hearing here, what we're witnessing here is such a prime example of how relationships should look between nonprofits and, technology partners. I think that's so important.
Yeah, and if I could add real quick too, that's a great point that you just made, because I've told Classy this quite a bit, and I tell this to a lot of different folks. There's vendors and there's partners. And what I'm excited about is that we have a partnership. We work cohesively together to collaborate on ideas, positions, and strategy to increase our year-over-year goals, but more importantly, continue to develop that roadmap that's going to make it easier, more accessible to donate. And I think when you break it down, it's a true partnership, and that's what's so exciting for us, and what keeps us motivated to continue to push forward.
I love it. All right, so let's dive into today's topic, which is Giving Tuesday. So as we know, Giving Tuesday has blown up incredibly since its inception in 2012. Scott, I'll let you lead this question. Why do you think this day has grown so much in popularity in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, I think so. Giving Tuesday was founded in 2012, I believe, which was roughly around the time where Classy was founded. So I think some of the trends that have actually powered our own growth are similar in some ways to what has powered Giving Tuesday's growth, and that's mainly around essentially younger generation getting into giving and technology, which I'll circle back to in a second. But at like from a macro perspective, consumerism in America is frankly just reached an all-time high, and I think that there's a growing section of Americans and outside of America who don't want to participate in the next Black Friday or Cyber Monday anymore. It's not like they don't want to give gifts, but they don't want to go crazy for those things, and they don't want to teach their kids that that's the norm. I think that more and more Americans are looking for an alternative. More and more nonprofits that we work with and folks that I just know that have participated in Giving Tuesday, they're using it as an opportunity to introduce philanthropy to new people, especially children. And I think that that's a big deal for the next, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So, we've seen massive growth with Giving Tuesday over the last roughly 10 years or a little less, 8 years, I think you'll see explosive growth in the next 10 to 20 to 30. And I think that that's because people are using this as an entry point and really a way to essentially like change people's perspective that, aggressive consumerism, if you will, is not necessarily the way it should be. Like you can balance buying things and whatnot with giving. And I think that that's like a massively important point. And I think Giving Tuesday's growth is certainly representative of that overarching trend. Now, kind of circling back to technology and the younger generations, a lot of the Giving Tuesday momentum has happened online. And I don't think it's a coincidence that around that time frame was the introduction of social media, was the introduction of platforms like Classy that make giving easier online, and there's many others. And I think that has only gone up and to the right since. So if you look at, the pie chart, if you will, of folks that give on Giving Tuesday, while it's certainly representative of all age groups and international, it's very strong amongst millennials and Gen Zers, which I had to look that up about a year ago what that was, but 18 to 22-year-olds, I'm getting old. But basically, young folks have really latched onto this, and they've used online and social media as a way to basically not only find out about new causes, but essentially, scream from the rooftops about what they care about, and then ultimately make a gift. The issue with Giving Tuesday, like any other sort of one-day event, is that it can be a little bit of a one-and-done situation where it's hard to retain those donors over time. And I know we'll circle back on that later about strategies at Giving Tuesday, but I would characterize it as just an amazing entry point into philanthropy and giving for all ages, but especially younger folks, and an opportunity to really change the paradigm. And I think what's really powering this, if you will, is the technological trend and the fact that it's easier than ever to give online.
What he said. I think that was great. For us,
that was classic.
A little comic relief doesn't hurt.
I hate to say this, but I agree with everything that he just said. I would be a poor debater. I really look at Giving Tuesday, and I agree with what you said in the very beginning. I think it's because of its foundational identity and how it started. I think it does. I think it's a gateway. A lot of people were more back in the day like, well, I donate to a specific cause, or I write a check to send into a specific nonprofit. And I think as that Giving Tuesday maturated with its brand intensity and identity as well as its awareness, I think you're right, Scott. It's really opened the door for a lot of people to utilize those teaching moments of what giving is generality, but Giving Tuesday, so to speak, and how Giving Tuesday has impacted numerous across the nation nonprofits, and how they've kind of spread that into individual nonprofits creating their own Giving Tuesday campaigns, and what Giving Tuesday means to them, and what Giving Tuesday actually means to their donors, and how that information is communicated to their donors as they continue to move past Giving Tuesday into the new fiscal year, into other campaigns that nonprofits may do. And then how does that wrap back up into a communication plan that then positions themselves for the next Giving Tuesday? And so I don't think it's just a one-day thing. I mean, it's fantastic, the amount of impact that Giving Tuesday has. And I know there's probably a lot of nonprofits that that's their day, right? That's it. And the impact that it brings is fantastic. But I think for us, and the way that we look at it, we continue to see momentum year over year, just not as a one-day campaign, but as a year campaign, and how we continue to push that message and communicate into the next Giving Tuesday campaign.
That's great. So you guys both touched on, the role of technology and how it plays into Giving Tuesday. Besides social media, like what other ways has technology impacted this particular day?
Yeah, I think the number one is probably mobile and mobile phones specifically. the younger generation is essentially born with a mobile phone in their hand, and it's sometimes difficult to remember that only 10 years ago or so that just wasn't the case. When we founded Classy in 2011, and again, Giving Tuesday was founded in around 2012. There was about 10% of traffic that came from mobile devices, and that includes tablets, et cetera. And today it's well over 50%. So that's over 50% of all traffic coming to nonprofits, donation pages, campaign pages, event pages is coming from a mobile device. Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty incredible, and you're seeing that in retail as well, not in outside of the nonprofit sector, and the nonprofit sector usually mirrors those trends. And I'd say mobile has been equally, if not more, disruptive to giving than just the internet and web-based online giving has been. So I think that's sort of a trend within a trend that we've seen that has really powered and changed the way nonprofits think about things, because there's one thing to go from offline to online, and then there's another whole thing to go from online, web-based, to mobile, and how the strategy needs to evolve for each of those evolutions is pretty distinct, actually. It's not trivial. So those types of things those trends are very active within the nonprofit conversation right now, or fundraising conversation. And then I would say the world is becoming more the giving world is becoming more distributed, meaning giving is not just happening on a nonprofit's website or their events or their peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns. The first donation especially is happening in multiple channels, whether that's Facebook or Twitch or you name it. There's going to be more and more and more and more channels over time, and to the point where it's going to be overwhelming for a nonprofit to be able to manage all of these channels, instead, and try to avoid having essentially their donors in a bunch of mini silos, if you will. And that's going to create it's a real opportunity, but it's going to create real challenges from a retention perspective, and it already is. But I think that's another very important trend that we're seeing, and have, especially over the last couple years, where as giving becomes easier to do, not just on the core nonprofit website and channels, if you will, giving is becoming easier everywhere and integrated into people's lives, their everyday lives, whether it's at work or at home or shopping or whatever. You're going to start to see an increase of accessibility in giving, but you're also going to see sort of this strain between the initial gift and a long-term sustainable relationship with the nonprofit. So it's both a pro and a really big challenge at the same time. And I think that a lot of people are going to try to be solving that problem over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also too, one thing I wanted to bring up while you were commenting was the transparency of giving, right? I think you touched on it around the term shopping. A lot of people donate to nonprofits that never even send a check into the actual organization. You have point of purchase. You have, whether you're at Walgreens or CVS. I think there's some things happening now with Lyft upon checkout. But the point being is that you're able to, select that additional $1 or that additional 50 cents or that additional $2 upon checkout through the drive-through of McDonald's. This all becomes transparency technology, meaning that no matter what you're doing throughout the course of the day, whether you're shopping on Amazon Smiles, whether you're at the gas pump, no matter where you are, you're going to be afforded the opportunity to make a donation to a nonprofit or to an organization at that point. And I think that's going to be important to take a look at as time continues to move forward. One of the things that was important that I felt that Scott was talking about too is the mobile aspect. And I'll throw another anomaly out there. Shriners Hospitals for Children, our donor base is not millennial. It's not Gen X. It's really kind of pushing more of the older demographic. But what's interesting about that is that we continue to grow, but also we find the same results. We find the same thing happening from a mobile perspective. We're looking at 50, 55, 56, 57% mobile versus desktop. And that's somewhat of an anomaly for us as well, because you're dealing with an older demographic, but yet they're adapting to the new technology, whether it's pads or smartphones or what have you. And that's intriguing to us. That's actually exciting for us, because we can continue to push the envelope of technology, whether it's one-touch giving or other idealisms that come into play for donating. But that's that's an interesting perspective to look at when you take a step back and see how that's continuing to push itself forward.
Yeah, mobile is such a growing technology and is becoming, the preferred way to give for a lot of
It is.
people. And it's not just for the younger generations; it's for the older generations as well. Um, and so, because everybody has this little computer at the tips of their fingers 24/7, for nonprofits who don't have a mobile optimized interface for their donors, they're going to see a loss. Because I mean, for me personally, when I go and donate, it's more likely that I'll donate if it's an easy way. If I go to someone's Instagram page and they're like, donate now, and I click that, I can click something like PayPal, and then there's my donation. It's in. I don't have to go scrambling through my purse to find my wallet. It makes it a lot more convenient for me.
Agreed.
And I think a lot of people feel that way as well.
And what's interesting too with a lot of, what we try to implement is a lot of the simple billing. So from a mobile device, if you just start typing in your billing address, it's going to be recognized to where then it populates the entire field.
Yep.
So you're not hunting and pecking for those little keyboard
Yeah.
letters.
And I honestly love
I mean,
that. I love when I type my name and it says it right there, my name, my address, my contact information. I just click it once and it auto populates. It's like one of the best feelings in the world for me because I don't have to do it.
I mean, for Giving Tuesday, I had to pop over to my mom's house. She's 75. What's funny is I walk in, she's got an earpiece in with her mobile phone on her laptop. She's like, hold on, I'm multitasking. Give me a second. I'm like, what? I had to walk back out and make sure I'm in the right apartment. So,
I love that.
So it's amazing how it's being adapted, and it's moving its way through society as the number one tool. And we have to be prepared for that. We have to develop to that, and we have to understand that the majority of our donors are spending their time, whether it's browsing a website or whether it's making a donation. But we have to be cognitive of that particular action and how it represents our organization when it comes to donating.
Yeah. And that's such a great story too, because, I guess the older generations are thought of as not tech savvy, but I think it's the opposite. I feel like they can adapt just fine because my mom, who is not good with technology at all, like throughout my whole life, she couldn't really use a computer. She didn't know how. But I go visit her now, and she has a Bluetooth on. She has her phone. She's always talking. She's always on an app. It's incredible.
It is.
All right. So let's talk about when we talk about all these different channels that offer donors opportunities to donate in so many different ways. Scott, what are some pointers for 2020? What creative tactics and strategies can nonprofits employ to boost donations with all of these different channels?
I think that the number one that comes to mind is that it's time to start an online recurring giving program if you haven't already, and if you have done so, then to invest in it and invest in growing it. And the reason why I say that is twofold. One, through our studies of our own platform data, we've been able to glean that recurring givers are about 5 times more valuable than a one-time giver. And they also go on to do repeat actions above and beyond their recurring gifts. Let's say that they donate for or subscribe to the organization, if you will, for a monthly giving or quarterly or whatever it is. They'll actually go on and make additional donations on top of that recurring gift. And they're also more likely to start personal fundraising pages or to volunteer. So there's a lot of upside because those donors are so engaged. They're basically signaling to you that they want to be engaged further. So they're valuable not only in the initial gift, the recurring gift that they've donated to the organization, but also in follow-on actions. And then I would say in a world that's getting noisier and noisier and noisier with all of the different channels that we were talking about, there needs to be more of an emphasis on building meaningful relationships where someone is going to become a repeat giver. So even if you can't convert the donor into a recurring donor right off the bat, really focusing on strategies that look to plug into these channels, but quickly convert them into more of a meaningful relationship versus sort of a surface level, give one time and then never come back sort of thing. And recurring giving program is an amazing tool, if you will, to essentially do that and to attract donors to have a deeper relationship with the organization. So recurring giving really for me is across the board one of the best strategies folks could do in 2020. And I think it's also a useful mechanism to combat some of the noisy just natural noise that exists out there with all these different channels and whatnot. I think if people self-select in to become a recurring donor after giving one time in whatever channel they're on, that's a massively positive signal that they want to continue to give and continue to be engaged with your organization. You just really shouldn't let that go. So, and Marty and I work very closely in this regard. Shriners has done an incredible job to build a monthly recurring donor base. But every person that leaves an organization after signing up, it's something that, we take very seriously, and you can learn from that and continue to iterate so that your, unsubscribe rate, if you will, keeps going down and down and down. And what you learn there is so tremendously valuable because it's essentially the value prop of your organization to fundraisers. So if you can really nail that and continue to challenge yourself to keep your unsubscribe rate low, if you will, from your recurring donor base, you will also be unlocking a cleaner and tighter value prop for your entire marketing and your organization, and really hone in on what donors are looking for and how they view your charity or your nonprofit or really any organization. So that's kind of my thoughts for next year. It's something that's really important here internally and something that we're building towards and continuing to invest in recurring giving features and functionality to help our organizations do that more, but also something that we just talk a lot with from a strategic level, our partners.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think for us, we look at it from a campaign perspective. I know Scot's really talking about a really unique and impressive roadmap as an organization. For us as an actual, as a nonprofit, looking at our Giving Tuesday campaigns and how we move things forward, we really take a lot of time and put a lot of effort into our maturation process on, campaign to campaign, meaning, Giving Tuesday 2017 versus 18 versus 19 and what we'll do in 2020. And I think for us, for our team, it's a lot about ensuring that we sit down and devise a campaign message that's going to be impactful, a campaign message that carries itself over, but more importantly, a campaign message that is going to reach the heart of our donors to include the amazing mission that we have as a nonprofit. And we do that a lot of different ways. This year was a little bit different than we did last year. We moved more into a go the distance type theme with our Giving Tuesday campaign. And to Scot's point, one thing I want to reiterate as well is that recurring donors for us are extremely important. We build our entire donor relations on recurring. We have direct television marketing that's centered around an entire recurring giving program called Love to the Rescue. We have a built-in premium item for recurring giving. And we have an unusual journey track that happens with that process in the way that we communicate to recurring donors and how we reach out to them via whatever channel it is we may be using. We use direct email marketing quite a bit, and we've created multiple segmentations in terms of donor journeys, tracks, welcome series, communication. How do we, in terms of how we communicate to a donor, to a one-time or a potential donor or a lapsed donor, is completely different than how we communicate to a recurring donor. Our message, the body of the message, or the slight treatments within the message are the same, but we speak to them completely differently from a recurring level because we want to make sure that they understand that we know that they're a donor, but more importantly, continue to educate them on other things that they can do with Shriners Hospitals for Children and how they can support our kids. And so for Giving Tuesday, some of the things that we did this year that we felt that were unique is we actually created an evergreen educational animated short, which is 120 seconds, that really talks about what is Giving Tuesday. Because one of the things that we noticed up front is that a lot of people give on Giving Tuesday, but they don't fully understand what it is. We've received countless emails. We've received communication. What is I want to donate, but what is Giving Tuesday? So we felt that it was important to create an educational video in a really unique style that educated and illustrates the purpose of Giving Tuesday, and more importantly, how does Giving Tuesday benefit Shriners Hospitals for Children and our kids? So we really introduced that. We introduced that with an actual 5-part drip campaign series through email, obviously our social media channels and what we did with that. We're also working on individualization versus personalization, getting past just the smart tagging aspects of email and communicating to folks, but really kind of drilling down even further and letting them know that we care about their donation from a recurring perspective, and we're excited to share different things with them that might be most impactful to them. And one of the cool things I thought that we did this year was a lot of fun is that the Going the Distance theme was unique. And what we did is we did a segmentation process for our thank you messages that kind of bracketed people from $0 to $250, from $250 to $500, and $500 to $1,000. And we created animated shorts and created animated GIFs within the email that presented them with medals for going the distance. And our donors loved it because we took the time to get into that personalization and segment, from our end to segment, but really push the message out in a way that's fun and exciting, and really let them know how much we really do appreciate their giving to us, not only on just Giving Tuesday, but on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. And it's things like that we look into to try to continue to move the needle forward, because it's so important for us as an organization to ensure that we let them know how much we appreciate it, because they can donate anywhere. It's like a restaurant, right? Mm-hmm. There's 50 restaurants downtown. That person chose to go to your restaurant. So the time that they walk in the door, it's extremely important to make sure that they have a first-class, world-class experience. Mm-hmm. And that's really kind of the way that we look at it when we develop individual campaigns, but really when it comes to Giving Tuesday, it's that process of strategic planning and idealism and constructiveness across the team that we look in. We try to uncover every stone and make sure that we communicate the best that we can across multiple channels in launching a campaign of that stature.
Yeah, that's great. All those things that you guys are doing over there, it really shows that you guys are really prioritizing your donors and listening to them and answering their questions and educating them on Giving Tuesday. So I think that's great.
And just if I could add, it's fantastic. I mean, it really is when you get into that process mm-hmm. of the amount of feedback that we get from donors, and it's just satisfying to know that we are communicating to them correctly, mm-hmm. And they appreciate that. And really, like I said at the very beginning, it's about the mission and about the children that we care for. Yeah. And that's probably the best gift that anybody can have on Giving Tuesday, but any day of the week. And that's what's so motivating about it.
That's awesome. And I mean, with everything that you do, I'm sure there's extensive planning that goes into it. So with any one of these programs, how far in advance do you guys plan ahead?
For us, we try to plan, and I think Scott may have said it earlier in this conversation, or the many times that we've talked. I'm probably going to steal some of his thunder.
Go for it.
We start planning for Giving Tuesday on December, or on the day after Giving Tuesday. So before Thankful Thursday, we're already talking about next year's Giving Tuesday. It's that important to us because, like I said earlier, too, we not only do we have Giving Tuesday, but we have a lot of other things that we do throughout the course of the year that we feel that cultivates itself in the following year to include holiday giving season, end of year giving. So we try to keep that train moving down the track, so to speak. We just don't look at the campaign as this is Giving Tuesday. We strategically planned for it. We launched it. We sent an email for Thankful Thursday, and then we pick it back up in November of next year. We continue to try to figure out ways that we can push the envelope, continue to move the needle, design, development, strategy, ideas, Now, we don't mean about it every single day and talk about it, but what I'm saying is that we put a pin in it on the board, and we make sure that everybody's aware that, okay, in 364 days, we've got another Giving Tuesday come up, and we really try to put things aside and build with building blocks. What is this going to look like as we get closer to that date the following year?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Giving Tuesday is, for the way we look at it at Classy, and the way a lot of our nonprofit partners look at it, is really the kickoff of the end of the year peak giving season. And so I'd say that the Giving Tuesday campaign, if you will, really runs from late November, early December, wherever it falls, all the way through the 31st of December. But really, if you're doing it right, you're working super hard to engage those donors who maybe are learning about you for the first time, like Marty said, and trying to educate them on not only what Giving Tuesday is, but what your organization does at a deeper level, so that you can use that moment in time, again, coming back to the world being so noisy these days. You have a real window there, and you don't want to necessarily send them 500 messages, but at the same time, you do have a window to educate them quickly on where they give and why it matters. And I think you are very well served to jump on that opportunity. And so when you asked about planning ahead, I think I look at the whole end of the year as sort of a campaign, with Giving Tuesday as a big kickoff milestone, if you will, and then that really does continue. But most of our organizations are starting to plan right away, like Marty said as well. They maybe give a week or so for some reflection and some headspace. That gets a little crazy at the end of the year, but more or less, you're doing reflections pretty quickly, and you should. What worked, what didn't, and how can you improve next year? And you're not meeting every day, but you're definitely thinking to the future, pretty much right away. So much is built up at the end of the year that it's important to start that planning process and that reflection process pretty much right away. And I also see a lot of organizations striving, sort of on the other hand, on the other side of the spectrum, striving to create moments of awareness throughout the year in a more consistent fashion as well. And so that doesn't mean like creating your own Giving Tuesday necessarily, but thinking about ways that you can create either somewhat of a sense of urgency, or break through the noise in some particular fashion throughout the year, maybe every month or every other month or whatever it is, just to keep the train going and to continue this sort of strategy of awareness and then engagement in quicker successions, rather than just building it all up at the end of the year. And then they're doing that in all different ways, but
yeah, and I think
see about 3 to 5 mega, big campaign efforts throughout the year.
Yeah, and I think the engagement part is particularly important for nonprofits to kind of focus on, because you want to keep them engaged throughout the whole year, so they're thinking about you and that your nonprofit's top of mind.
Yeah, and I think Scott said it too. It's about reflection, right? It's about taking a look at your numbers after Giving Tuesday and reflecting on, what can we do moving forward. But it's also, I think, for us, what we take a quick, not a quick look at, but what we quickly do is we take a look at our segmentation, and we look at high value donors, we look at recurring donors, we look at lapsed donors, we look at people that may have not donated that we emailed or we tried to communicate with, and that's where we start the business plan. That's where we start our strategic planning. Is how do we talk to a high value donor? How do we talk to this person? How do we talk to that person? And I think it's really kind of dialing down into those particular segments to figure out how can we better communicate to them, and then continue to push that forward. But I also agree too. I like the idea of the kind of the mini campaigns building up, because Scott is right. With Giving Tuesday this year on December 3rd, and then your holiday giving season, and then that's followed up directly with your end of year giving. There is a lot going on in 6 weeks, or 5 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks leading up to Giving Tuesday, which I think are extremely important. And I think, from a nonprofit perspective, is what type of mini campaigns can you do throughout the course of the year that kind of build up that strategy? It's almost like, you have your holiday holiday giving campaign, but then, in July, you're launching Christmas in July. a lot of retail stores do that. They'll do that Christmas in July thing, buy your ornaments, buy all that kind of stuff now in preparation. And I think those types of campaigns can be extremely successful when you're cultivating your donors and reaching out to them, or kind of creating that initiative. So it's really interesting to see how that year propels itself based on the different styles of campaigns, but leading into that cultivation of one large scenario at the end of the year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, so the next thing I want to just touch on is, the tax laws. Did they have any effects, do you think, on in 2019's Giving Tuesday?
Yeah, I can tackle that one first from sort of a platform-wide perspective. There's a lot of anxiety coming into this particular end-of-year giving season. There was a good amount last year, but even more this year, as the sort of tax laws had a full year or two to sort of marinate in, if you will. I think that those fears were mostly unfounded. I think what we found in our Why America Gives survey leading up to peak giving, which we do every year, which essentially sort of polls potential donors about where they might give and ask them various questions about their giving habits and whatnot. We actually saw quite a good amount of momentum through that survey coming into this year, which we had said at the time was a great signal that it was going to be a strong year, and that's exactly what happened. Giving was up, and we were seeing record amounts of gifts on the Classy platform. We achieved about 27 million collectively just on the last year, or the last day of the year, and 42 million in the last 2 days of the year, which was up about 35% for all of December, which is pretty amazing. So you're seeing still really, really great growth regardless of the tax laws. Now, they might have had some effect in there, but certainly not enough to dissuade Americans to give. I think giving is so ingrained in the DNA of America. And if you look at sort of the history of giving over time, looking at, say, Giving USA report or something like that, you'll see that even in recessions like 2008 recession, giving kind of flatlines, but it doesn't go down steeply. It doesn't decline. People give through recessions. And the stat I love is more people give than vote. So in America, which is crazy, but about 60% of Americans give, where I think it was like 54% or so gave in the last presidential election. So just, kind of keeping that in perspective, giving is a big part of our culture, and hopefully moving forward, things like tax law changes won't dissuade people from continuing that tradition.
Yeah, from a nonprofit perspective, we haven't experienced. I don't think we've seen any decline. We've seen year-over-year growth. As far as the tax laws, I agree with what Scott said. I think the propensity to give is there, and there isn't a decline in giving. I'm not an expert at this by any stretch of the imagination when it comes to tax law. I don't know if that has any bearing on plan to major giving. A little bit different, with property and those types of things. So I would defer not to comment on anything like that. But from an online transaction process and what we do on a day-to-day basis, we haven't seen any impact.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're hearing a lot here from a lot of people that we work with in NonProfit Pro too. So it makes me a little happy to hear that come from you two guys as well.
So in 2019, on Giving Tuesday, nonprofits raised a total of $512 million. That is huge. So what do you think? Or do you think that these numbers are going to continue to rise year after year, or do you think eventually they're gonna flatline?
I think they're going to keep going up. Like we were talking about earlier, I think that Giving Tuesday is really an amazing entry point for people to learn about giving, to learn about great causes, to learn about great organizations like Shriners. And you're seeing more and more parents really teach their kids about giving through Giving Tuesday. It's just an amazing entry point. So I actually think that we have some really great wind behind us when it comes to Giving Tuesday and giving in general. And I think it's spreading internationally too. America, again, has such an amazing giving DNA, but we're seeing uplifting giving across many, many countries as well. And so I think it's just the spirit of giving is strong, alive, and well, and I think we'll continue to see that. Now, Giving Tuesday obviously has seen explosive growth because in just the law of big numbers, you're going to obviously see some decline over time. But I think that fundamentally, it's going to continue at a really strong pace.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, just speaking from a nonprofit level, we continue to see it grow, and there has been exceptional growth from year over year in some cases. And to Scott's point, there may be a point in time where you do see that decline, but I think because of the excessive growth, I think you don't ever really see that dip on the graph. I think you see maybe minor adjustments as we continue to move forward, but I think it's always going to be an upward tick. I really do believe that because of the way that we give, the channels that people can give into, Facebook, Instagram, you start working in all these other different types of gaming platforms, transparency and giving at the pump or at the cash register or whatever they're wherever they're at, and I see Giving Tuesday permeating into that type of environment even deeper. So it's to me, it's always going to be on an uptick. It's just when, at what levels does it uptick? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that you probably keep an eye on over time. But I certainly do think that this time next year we'll be talking about another massive growth in Giving Tuesday, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm really, really looking forward to it.
We are too.
Well, I'm sure. We talked about so many great things today. And again, thank you guys so much for joining me. But I like to end every podcast episode asking our guests this one question. And Scott, I will let you go first. If there's one piece of advice you would give to a nonprofit, what would it be?
Kind of echoing what part of our earlier conversation around recurring giving, I would say that, one piece of advice would be to spend as much time on the depth of every relationship that you have with existing donors as you do on new donor acquisition. So there's always going to be the next channel, the next sort of shiny object, and you should challenge yourself to try those things. I think that's a culture of innovation, and for some it works amazing. But just don't forget sort of the tried and true secret of fundraising, whether that's online or offline. And that's really about relationships and the depth of those relationships. So I think it's just something to not lose, if you will, through all the kind of the noise of today.
I agree. I mean, it really is staying true to your core donors and how you communicate with them. Again, being as thankful as possible, because without them, we can't be doing what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's always important to remember that in how we communicate with them and how we talk with them. From a little bit different angle, I think what's the advice that I would give, and something that I try to live by here on a day-to-day basis, is really strategic planning, design, development, and execute. Taking complete care of each individual piece that goes out, mm-hmm. and making sure that communication and brand is consistent, and you're finding the best ways to spread your mission collectively, cohesively, and trying to create that best user experience for the donor.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so key for nonprofits to take note of, and I hope they do, those who are listening in today. So that about wraps it up for today's episode. If you're still listening, thank you so much for hanging in there. I know it's been a long one. We're hitting about 50 minutes now. But I think this whole conversation today about Giving Tuesday is so important. And we talked so much about how technology influences the growth of Giving Tuesday. And we talked about a lot of key strategies that you can bring with you into 2020 and start planning early to get those Giving Tuesday numbers to continue to grow. Martin and Scott, oh my gosh, it's been so fun having you guys both on. Thank you so much for joining me on the Nonprofit Voice and sharing your insights and expertise on Giving Tuesday trends.
Thank you for having us. It was a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
Definitely appreciate it, and enjoyed immensely, and thanks again.
And so on behalf of Nonprofit Pro, we will see you in the next episode of the Nonprofit Voice. Have a great day.